Hi there. I am the CRM Ninja, and on today's episode of the Oops Fact, I have Michael Hauck. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Very excited to be here.
I'm very excited to have you here, and one of the reasons for that is my background, because until you told me that you own a slingshot, I had no idea what a slingshot was. Now, obviously, a slingshot is something you use to throw stones, but perhaps you could enlighten people as to what this mean-looking machine in my background is actually and how the heck you came to have one.
So what's really funny about it, I like you, I'm an avid motorcyclist, maybe not as avid as you anymore, but I've ridden all my life. We won't get into age just yet anyway, but for a very long time. But as I've gotten older and a family and everything else, there are some risks that come from motorcycling, especially I live in the Tampa, Florida area, which is just insane for driving.
Right.
And so my wife and I decided that it wasn't a good idea for me to own a street bike anymore. I still own dirt bikes.
Okay.
And so this was the compromise. It took me a little while to convince her. But it's one of my biggest successes in my marriage, in that we literally fight over who gets to drive it. If you've ever been in a 70s sports car like a Triumph or an MG or any of those old sports cars, it rides the same way. You feel every bump in the road. The experience is very, very raw. It's fun. It's not an overly powerful machine, but because it weighs so little and it's open and low to the ground, you feel like you're going really, really fast, and it's just an awesome experience. We love it. The kids love it and everything else, and they're not expensive. So it was a good compromise, and we're glad we got it, but thanks for asking.
So this is a three-wheeler, right?
Yes, sir.
Now,
yep.
Unlike in I won't use the word traditional. I just use the word traditional, but traditional English comedy, something called Only Fools and Horses, whereby there was a street trader who had something called a Reliant Robin, which has one wheel at the front and two wheels at the back, and was a little dinky blue thing that fell over at the slightest push. This isn't like that, right?
No,
it's not a little dinky toy.
No, like I said, it's not overly powerful. It's relatively small motor, but because it's so small and light, it doesn't need a big motor to be pretty quick and go fast. And because of being open and low, you feel like you're going faster than you are. But it's not a toy at all. It's fun, and I working from home, I use it as my primary source of transportation whenever possible.
Do you ever feel like Batman?
It's funny that you say that. I get that compliment all the time, because mine is all black, unlike the one in your picture. I have no red on it, and people all say, look, it looks like the Batmobile, and it's funny because they're made by Polaris, who is big here in the States. They actually once upon a time were a customer of mine, and going all the way back to my intro to dynamics. We'll talk about that maybe later, but they make four-wheelers and snowmobiles and all kinds of things, and they came out with these I think 2014 or 2015 was the first year. They've been making them ever since, and they're it's still a niche. There's not a ton of people that own them, but it's much like ninja clubs or goldwing clubs or those kind of things. It's people that own them tend to come together and do things, and it's a community. It's a lot of fun, but it definitely grabs attention wherever you go, because people just aren't used to them.
Have you ever thought of a side gig, dressing up as Batman and turning up one of these to parties?
Ironically, I don't mind poking fun at myself. So the closest I can get, completely different tangent, but you brought it up, right? I do keep a cape in my office.
Oh, nice.
That's as close as I can get to Batman. Sorry.
Okay.
You don't want me being Batman.
Okay. Noted. I actually know the person. He lives in Ireland. He's somewhat of an acquaintance of mine. I would say a good friend. I chat with him occasionally. Who owns all the original Batman suits.
Wow.
And gets to go to all the premieres dressed as Batman. He not only owns the suits, he also happens to be a multi-degree Dan in 3 different martial arts, and a fitness instructor and a medical professional. But he bought them out of the studio by having clear at some point. Then there was a fire and all the rest went up in smoke. And then they were like, can we buy them back? And it's like, no. And they went, we'll give you lots of money. And he went, no. And they went, okay, will you come and do premieres with us? And he went, okay, I'll do that if you send free tickets. So
that's awesome.
That is
awesome for him.
That is awesome. He does not, for the purpose of people listening who are comic book fans, he does not lend it out. Just making this very, very
Good
clear. This was on the
clarification.
first
Yes.
for clarification.
Good clarification.
For clarification. So you've been doing CRM, I believe, slightly longer than I have, but the dynamics and stuff. You must have seen a lot in your time and had some very interesting things. So what oops factor would you like to share with us today? It could be a couple of small ones. I'm really curious as to what you're going to come up with.
I struggled with this a lot, just thinking about the theme, of the show and everything else. And it may be a little obvious, but I can give a couple different examples, and some of them are CRM related, and frankly, some of them are not CRM related, but it all ties to the same thing. And I have to give credence to one of my teammates here at CongruentX, who's a good friend of mine. And he came up, and he's very creative. He literally has a logo for it that's kind of a ripoff of the NASA spaceship. Oh. And we like to use the acronym NASA for never assume, simply ask.
Nice.
Which obviously in the consulting world becomes really, really important. And so I was thinking about this, and just a couple stories that have come about in my life, some relative to CRM and some not relative to CRM, where we could have saved a lot of time, money, and or frustration by not assuming and asking questions that, especially those of us who maybe have been doing this for a long time and think we know some things, tend to fall into that trap. And of course, as you know, with Microsoft constantly innovating on the product, something that worked yesterday may not work the same way today.
Yes.
So therefore, we shouldn't assume. And my first example has nothing to do with CRM. I'll go all the way back to, I was in the military for 10 years. When I got out of the military, like many ex-military, I became a consultant. And in this case, I was a consultant to the federal government in the United States, and was working with the Department of Justice. And I was supporting offices around the country. And this was, really when PCs were first starting to roll out. Okay. And we had an issue where it was an office in South Texas, right by the border, that dealt with immigrants, right? An INS office, Immigration and Naturalization Services is what they call it in the US.
Okay.
And they were having what they called an amnesty day, where illegals could come in and fill out the paperwork and apply for citizenship and so on and so forth. So it's a big deal for them, given on where they are. And I get this panicked phone call. It was going to be Saturday that they were doing this. I get this panicked phone call because their big printer didn't print, right?
Okay.
So we go through all of the, and when I say big printer, we're talking, late 80s, right? So it was about as big as the Slingshot behind you. And we went through everything, absolutely couldn't figure it out, whatever. And so my boss says, we got to fix this. So get on the first flight, fly down to Texas, get it fixed. Okay. So off I go, fly down to Texas, get into the office, very nice people, walk in, start looking at the printer. I can't even get the lights to come on.
Oh. And
then I realized, does this thing have power? She's like, yeah. And I'm like, well, where does it plug in? She goes, it's kind of behind and underneath it. And I said, well, anybody unplug it? She's like, it takes 4 people to move it. We didn't unplug it. And so I start looking around, and I said, did you recently have the floors cleaned? And she goes, oh yeah, we got everything cleaned for tomorrow because it's such a big day. There's going to be some politicians coming in and all these kind of things. Right. I said, is there a chance the cleaning crew moved the printer? So sure enough, we pulled together 5 or 6 people. We pulled the printer out, plugged it in, and we were good to go.
Awesome.
Never thought about asking if the printer had power.
Yeah.
So there we go. Never assume, simply ask. Is the printer plugged in? Does it have power? So nothing to do with CRM, but that's the first story.
I think that's great.
My second one, which is CRM related, one of my first big implementations back in 2011, we were implementing for a retail chain of boating stores they're headquartered here in Florida. They're actually all across the US.
Okay.
And we had gone through and configured the system and got everything to work and gone through all of the testing and everything else. And we were starting to roll it out to different offices. And I get a frantic phone call from one of the store managers of one of the biggest stores that they have in Florida. And he says, I need you to shut it off. And I'm like, shut what off? And he goes, CRM. And I said, what do you mean shut it off? And he goes, I have 27,000 contacts on my phone and it won't stop.
I have to say, you're probably lucky there, considering that nowadays in the cloud, you couldn't just shut it off.
Right. And it turned out, as many people know that work with Dynamics CRM and in particular Outlook integration, the old way or the new way, right? That the default filter is, if I turn on synchronization, all the records that I own in the system, all the contacts, all the accounts, those kind of things are going to synchronize to my Outlook. And if I have Outlook synchronized to my phone, there we have it.
Boom.
And we never thought about the fact that we might have a store where the store manager doesn't believe that his or her salespeople should own the records individually, that they're going to own them all in case the salesperson quits.
I have to say, a boating dealership with 27,000 contacts is a decent size.
They have some big. Their average boat sale was, I believe, somewhere around the $500,000. They sell a lot of yachts. It's
nice.
It's big. But yeah, really cool. Great company, great people. But yeah, just we never thought about the fact that the store manager's like, no, I'm going to own all the contacts.
Yeah.
So. That's my CRM related oops factor, which again just comes back to, every time you think you know what's going to happen, you'll be surprised. And so my advice is
NASA.
Ask NASA. Yeah. And again, I take no credit for it, but I use it on a daily basis.
I can very clearly picture in my mind lots of places I could go ahead and use such things for. So. I'm not an astronaut.
I'll be glad to connect you to the originator of that, and you can see if you can get licensed, to use it and those kind of things, or your guests.
That would be great. We can pick that up offline.
Yeah. Anyway, so those are my oops stories.
Very nice. So, apart from obviously never assume, always ask, or simply ask rather, NASA. What would you say, given you've seen a large number of projects, what would your advice be to somebody starting off? Your top 3 tips for how to avoid issues on projects, whether that's customer related, team related, or tech related?
Well, it's interesting. The firm that I work for now, which is I'm the logo in the background, right? I'm one of the founders and part owner of. And we actually, all of us, the 4 founders that started it, some of whom have all consulted for other firms, some very, very big ones, some not so big. And we decided we wanted to do things a little differently, and we really try and focus on our clients and the outcomes and technology, Dynamics in particular. We try and take a back seat, right? We, people like you and I spend a lot of time learning the product and what it does and so on and so forth. And so, I think any consultant has to have that unquenching desire to learn and invest their time. And if they don't enjoy what they're doing, it's probably not going to be a career for them. Yeah. But I think the expectation is the technology aspect, to me, I think is the easy part and the part that people can learn as long as they have the right DNA and they're interested and they want to learn it. The challenge is many of those same folks that like to solve problems tend to approach things in a particular way. And if the person that they're talking to doesn't approach things in a particular way, then sometimes there's a disconnect there.
It's a bit like saying a developer will always approach things with a development approach to it. A SharePoint person would approach with a SharePoint thing. An app dev will do that. You approach with your nature for it. So if you're talking to somebody who's similarly minded to you, a similar background, that works very well.
Exactly.
But as a consultant, you're probably likely to come up against lots of people who don't think the same way that you do.
especially when we talk about business users and we talk about CRM and the folks that aren't technical in nature, or now thanks to low code, no code, think they're technical in nature, right? But don't understand how logic works and those kind of things. So I think the biggest thing there, again, if we're talking about consulting in that line of work, is really, take some time both introspectively to understand how you think and work and your strengths and weaknesses, and to figure out, I don't care what tool or technique you use. I've been exposed to many of them, Myers-Briggs indicator, Real Colors is a program that I'm actually very, very familiar with and like in particular. And there's many others like that of these psychological profiles and strength finders and so on and so forth. But I think you have to be a little bit of a student of psychology in terms of being able to identify how different people think and work and being able to bridge that gap. And I believe personally that that's where the magic really occurs. It's not purely the technology behind it. It's the ability to understand what this other human being is trying to convey to you and translate that. And again, then if you know the product, right, being able to show them something that resonates with them and where they see value.
That is so true. It's about, it's a bit like talking about center of excellence, I guess, in a Power Platform. So many people think it's about the tooling, it's about the tech, it's about this, it's about that, right? That's such a small part of it. The tech itself it's about the mindset, it's about the approach, it's about the support, it's about understanding governance and organizations and business processes. And behind most of those, practically all of those things, are people. And people think about things in different ways, and it's really about understanding them and how they tick and how they work to try and give the solutions right for them. And then you can bring the tech in as appropriate.
Exactly.
Wonderful. Well, Michael, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experiences.
Thank you very much for having me. Enjoyed it, and hopefully we'll talk soon.
Definitely. It's been wonderful having you on the show. Viewers, we hope that you've enjoyed it. If any of you happen to be in the Florida region and are wondering what a Slingshot does, feel free to connect with Mike on social media and ask for his advice, or possibly to go see it in person. Also, feel free. Yeah, it can only fit one person at a time though, right?
Two. Me and one other.
Oh, okay, right.
That's the beauty. It's side by side, right? So unlike the motorcycle, we can actually have a conversation when we have.
I may need to put Florida on my list. I don't know if Polaris sell these in the UK. I'm going to go check.
I don't know that they. I don't know if they do either, but they certainly do in the US.
I'm going to take a look. Otherwise, I may just need to pop over to Florida.
You know where to find me.
Indeed.
Always welcome.
Feel free to.
And it's stick shift. So.
That sounds really good. Feel free to check out the rest of the Oops Factor playlist, subscribe to the channel, and take a look at the blog. And if you would like to come on the show and share your own experience, possibly if you have a Slingshot yourself or something else, and your Oops Factor, of course, feel free to put your details in the link below, down below there somewhere, and I'd love to get you on the show. But above all, have a wonderful day.